It is one of the greatest aviation mysteries in modern history. What happened to Malaysia Airlines Flight 370? MH370 vanished in 2014, flying from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing, 239 people on board. Now, a group of aviation experts has put forward what it believes is the most likely theory of what happened. Let's bring in Larry Vance, one of the analysts featured in the latest episode of 60 Minutes Australia. MH370, the Situation Room. He's a former senior investigator with the Transportation Safety Board of Canada. Thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here.
You know, I was reading the article about what your theory is, which is basically that this was a man on a suicide mission, which ended up being mass murder. And some key points made sense. But let's step back and let me ask you what led you to that theory.
Well, the theory started to formulate in my mind quite early in the event. Actually, I started as an accident investigator. You tend to go through what are all the possible scenarios, and you go through the hijacking, and you go through the systems failures, and all these sorts of things. I teach accident investigation, so I was doing this in relation to getting ready to teach courses, and we started to use MH370 in our courses, and it was quite apparent from the beginning that the most likely scenario was a pilot event. But then when the flaperon was discovered, and then the piece of flap that was next to it was discovered, washed up on the shore in Africa, and we started looking at the physical evidence, my partners and I started looking at the physical evidence from that, it was quite apparent that the flaps were extended. They were down when the airplane entered the water.
Which tells you what? Which tells you what?
Which tells us that the flaps cannot get extended unless somebody does it. The flaps also cannot get extended unless the engines are running. The theory that was in play with the official investigation was that the airplane ran out of fuel at high altitude and did a dive down into the ocean. The evidence on the flaps prove conclusively that that's not what happened. What happened was that somebody took the airplane down to the surface of the ocean and landed it intentionally in a condition to have it with the least possible damage, so as it would go to the bottom and never be found again. That has to be done by somebody in the airplane, and the only people in the airplane who can fly it are the pilots.
Yeah, let's remind people about what the theory was at the time, or that developed after the crash, was that the plane basically lost power and everybody lost oxygen and was unconscious, passed out, and that the plane basically went on its own, sort of on autopilot, I guess, and went around until it lost fuel and crashed, correct?
Well, that was what most people were surmising happened, and you know, the investigation certainly went with the idea that the airplane ran out of fuel, and crashed at high speed into the ocean. And as I say, that's just simply not correct.
So you also took a look at where the plane sort of fell off the radar and where it popped back up here and there. And you noticed a connection, I guess, to one of the pilots, correct?
Well, if you start from the first events of this whole scenario, somebody turned the transponder off in the airplane. Somebody took the airplane on a well-planned route up through different air traffic control sectors, so it would be least likely to be noticed on primary radar or noticed by military people and so on. The whole thing was crafted that way. In the back of in the cockpit, somebody did all this. It had to be one of the pilots for sure, and that combined with what we know happened at the end of the flight. If the pilot started it and the pilot finished it, then we know that it was a pilot event, which makes it a criminal act, a murder and a suicide. And
what do we know about the pilot, in the sense that would there have been a motivation for suicide in this case?
You know, that's an aspect of it that's not my specialty, and I tend to shy away from that. My expertise is in aircraft reconstruction, flight reconstruction, and accident investigation. The pilot's motivation is something somebody else will have to work on. I give people like me give them all the factual information that they need to know what happened. What motivated the pilot, I really don't know, and that's not my area of expertise.
All right, very quickly, Larry, how confident do you feel about your theory of suicide mass murder?
Well, I feel very, very confident, 100% confident in what we found with the wreckage analysis, and I think that proves what happened.
Larry Vance is an aircraft accident investigator and author of MH370 Mystery Solved. Larry, thanks for joining us today.
It's nice talking to you. Thanks.